Okay, so in problem number 9, it would probably be a good idea to try to do parts B and C on your own, or at least get them started before you look at the video. So I'm going to do part A for you, and then again, pause the video, see if you can do B and C on your own. Okay, so just a little bit of a crash course in graphing trig equations. The two out front is going to represent our size, that's our amplitude. Okay. This number here, or whatever's being added or subtracted to the x value in here, is going to shift our graph. So this is going to shift it the opposite of what you think. So it says plus pi over 4. It's going to shift it to the left pi over 4. And this is our vertical shift. So this is our horizontal shift, which goes left or right. This is our vertical shift. And as you might guess, minus 2 means we're going to shift it down 2 units. So let me write a few things over here on the side before we get started. Alright, the amplitude is 2. The horizontal shift, that's going to be negative pi over 4. And the vertical shift is going to be negative 2. Okay, so on our graph it tells us to go from negative pi to pi, so as long as we have at least that amount, so we can go a little bit further if we need to in the left or right direction, but the problem wants us to graph at least that amount. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to shift my graph to the left, pi over 4. I want to put a tick mark where I think that would be. Then, in order to get all of my other tick marks, I need to figure out what the period is. And then once I find out what the period is, I'm going to break it into 4 pieces, because there's 4 quadrants in the unit circle, so it kind of makes sense, or kind of goes with that same idea. So we're going to break it into 4 pieces. So let's figure out what the period is. So I think this is in the beginning of this packet. To figure out the period, we take 2 pi divided by the b value. Well, the b value in this case is just 1. Okay, so let's see if I can change the color here to highlight that. Okay, so anyways, the b value is just 1. So I'm going to plug in 2 pi divided by 1. And we get 2 pi. If I break that into 4 equal pieces, that means just to divide by 4. 2 pi divided by 4, that's going to give us pi halves, or pi over 2. So this I, or this interval here, is going to be our spacing. So each tick mark, or each amount in between the tick marks, is going to be pi over 2 units. That's approximately 1.57 units in between. But anyways, I'm going to go on my x-axis now, and I'm going to subtract pi over 2. And then I'm going to subtract pi over 2 again, because it's telling us to go to negative pi. So we have to make sure that we have at least go to negative pi on the x-axis and positive pi on the x-axis. So if I do this twice, you're going to see that by subtracting our interval, so negative pi over 4 minus pi over 2, that gives us negative 3 pi over 4. And then the next spot here, that gives us negative 5 pi over 4. Again, I just subtracted pi over 2, then pi over 2 again. Negative 5 pi over 4 is actually a little bit less than negative pi, so we went far enough on the x-axis. So again, I'm going to go in the right direction now by adding pi over 2. If I add pi over 2 to negative pi over 4, that's going to give me positive pi over 4. Add pi over 2 again, that's going to give us 3 pi over 4. Now if I add pi over 2 again, I get 5 pi over 4. Now there's some symmetry here on both sides here, but don't think that that always happens. That's just a kind of a nice thing with this problem, but that doesn't always happen, so just be careful. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this now. Oh, before I graph it, let me put my center line in. My center line is going to be at -2, because that's what my vertical shift is. So my center line, it kind of helps if you draw it in there. It's going to be here, and I circled this at the very beginning because that's my starting point. Okay, so when I start graphing my points, I'm going to start here. Now I'm going to remind you guys that this says sine, so the sine always starts at the center line. Okay, so my first point is going to be directly below that on the center line. And does sine increase or decrease? Well, it starts out increasing. So I'm going to increase the amount of my amplitude. So I'm going to go not here, but I'm going to go here because the amplitude's 2. Now, it's just going to oscillate back and forth. So now it's going to drop down back down to the center line. And now I guess I should add in some more values on my y-axis. So my y-axis is actually going to go all the way on the -4 because, again, our points are being graphed 2 above and 2 below our center line. So now I'm going to go in the other direction following that pattern. Since this was kind of, if we trace backwards, up and then down, it's going to keep going down and then back up to here. So here's the entire graph. And we did follow the directions that said to go from -pi to pi. We went a little bit further in the left and right direction, but as long as we have at least that amount, we're in good shape. So try to do parts B and C before watching the rest of this video. Okay, so let's go ahead and try B and C. I'll go a little bit faster with those. Let me first start off by erasing this. Alright, thank you for being patient. So let's go ahead and do this one as well. -3 cosine of x minus pi over 3 plus 1. So first things first, I want to identify a few things. The amplitude is +3. Remember, the amplitude is always positive. Our horizontal shift in this case is going to be positive pi over 3. Remember, inside the parentheses changes the sign. Vertical shift is going to be +1 or +1. While we're at it, let's keep going. Let's identify the period. The period is 2 pi divided by the b value. The b value in this case is just 1. So 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. If we break 2 pi into 4 equal intervals, 2 pi divided by 4 gives us pi halves again, so just very similar to the last problem. So the first thing I like to do is go ahead and label my axes. I'll start out with labeling the y-axis first this time. So I know my center line is going to be at +1 because that's my vertical shift. My amplitude is 3 this time, so I need to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. That gives us up to +4. I want to also go down 3. 1, 2, 3. That brings us down to -2. Next, I'm going to put my starting value, which is pi over 3 this time. Again, this tells us where to start right here, the pi over 3. So pi over 3 I'm going to put right here. If I add my interval, pi over 3 plus pi over 2, that's going to give us 5 pi over 6. If I add my interval again, 5 pi over 6 plus pi over 2, it's going to give us 4 pi over 3. We went far enough on the right side of the x-axis because 4 pi over 3 is a little bit bigger than pi. And our original direction said to graph from negative pi to pi. So going backwards now, if I subtract pi over 2 from pi over 3, I get negative pi over 6. Subtract pi over 2 again, I get negative 2 pi over 3. If I subtract pi over 2 once again, because this isn't quite big enough yet, or not, I'm sorry, small enough, it's not down to negative pi yet, it's only negative 2/3 of pi, we're going to get 7 pi over 6. And make sure we have that negative. Alright, I'm going to circle my starting point just to remind everybody. My center line is at positive 1 this time. And I'm starting either on the center line at my maximum value or my minimum value. But this one says cosine. Cosine always starts at either the max or min, but we're going to start this time at the min because there's a negative symbol here. So we're going to start at the minimum value, which is negative 2. And then we're going to continue the trend of a cosine graph. So cosine graph, the next point on here would be the center line, then at the max. We go backwards, would be at the center line, at the max, and then back to the center line again. So we get a nice cosine graph. Yours is hopefully probably a little bit prettier than mine. Okay. And there we have it. We have it over from negative pi to pi, actually a little bit bigger than that, so we went a little above and beyond what they asked us to do. Okay, great. And let's try the last one, part C. Oh, I'm sorry, there's no part C for this problem, so let's do number 10, which is another graphing problem, so it goes with what we were doing. Okay, so similar to before, but this time they're just asking us to start at 0, no biggie, but we're going to go over 2 period interval, so a little bit more vocab, I guess, in this problem. So what that means is that we need to go look at what the period is first, and then we're going to go 2 times. When it says a little trick here, when it says 2 periods, well, 1 period, if you think about going around the unit circle, if you start at 0, then 90, then 180, 270, and back to 360, that's 5 points. If we go one more time around the unit circle, we go back to 90, or I guess really if we're adding 90 to 360, that would be 450, 540, 630, and then 720. That's going to give us a total of 9 points over a 2 period interval. So again, in short, 2 period interval, 9 points. Okay, so let's get some things out of the way first. The amplitude, or I'm sorry, the period. is 2 pi divided by the b value. The b value in this case is 3. The interval, even though they didn't ask us to state that, it's going to help us graph it. I had to break this into 4 pieces. So I want to take 2 pi over 3 times it by 1/4, because it's the same thing as dividing by 4. That's going to give us 2 pi over 12 for a simplified interval of pi over 6. Okay. And the amplitude is positive 2. And I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to start off this time by labeling my y-axis. So my y-axis is going to be shifted down 1 because I have a vertical shift of -1. So I'm going to do that. I'm also going to go ahead this time, a little out of order from last time, and strike my center line. Now, again, the amplitude was 2, so I have to go down 2 from this and up 2 from this. So I'm going to go down 2. That would give me -3. I'm going to go up 2 from my center line. 1, 2. That would bring me up to positive 1. I'm going to go ahead and plot my points on the, my intervals on the, or my tick marks on the x-axis. Well, if my starting value this time, we don't have a horizontal shift this time. So we're actually starting right on the y-axis. Okay, so I want to circle my y-axis. That's my starting point. Okay, let me kind of be consistent with the last couple problems. Oops. I think the last couple of problems I did in a res, I was just trying to be consistent. But anyways, this is our starting point. I'm going to add my interval, which is pi over 6 this time, to get all the rest of my points. And I said I needed 9 points. So here's my first point at 0. My next point would be just pi over 6. My next point would be 2 pi over 3. Or I'm sorry, pi over 3. My next point would be pi over 2. Again, I'm getting these intervals, or these tick values on the x-axis, simply by adding pi over 6 each time. So if I add pi over 6 again, I get 2 pi over 3. If I add pi over 6 again, I get 5 pi over 6. If I add pi over 6 again, I get just pi. 7 pi over 6. And last but not least, because we need 9 points, 4 pi over 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, looks good. So go ahead and graph the points. We're talking about sine. So sine always starts at the center line. I'm going to start here at the center line. This is my first point. And then sine starts out by increasing. So I'm going to go up to my max value, back down to my center line, then down to my minimum value. Up to the center line, up to the max, down to the center line, down to the min, back up to the center line. So now we have our nice sine wave. Whoops, missed that point a little bit. It's okay. Alright, great. So now we have all 9 points. So that means 2 periods again.